codifying, consuming, correlating, and federating the data off of all of our systems so that we can get better insights. IT typically already has data visualization or analytics capabilities, whether it's a data lake or some sort of deep data warehouse where you can pull this off and start correlating all this information in real time. It makes a huge difference.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. The divide between IT and OT has always been challenging for business executives, but this divide has always existed and still exists among other groups too. For example, sales and marketing teams don't like to deal with IT as they are perceived to slow things down. The supply chain doesn't like them either, as they would rather manage their systems independently than dealing with IT. While other groups have realized the importance of IT and created true partnerships, OT teams have yet to figure out how to eat at the same dinner table with IT. In today's episode, our guest, Tom Harrop from Splunk, shares his insights into the core reasons for the organizational divide between IT and OT. He also describes why IT cannot catch up with other departments such as sales, marketing, HR, and supply chain with IT, and what companies can do to remove silos. Finally, he describes the ideal Industry 4.0 architecture for companies to converge their IT and OT functions. Let me introduce Tom to you. Tom has 25 plus years industry knowledge with senior leadership roles spanning IT and data center operations, communications, media and entertainment, manufacturing and distribution, healthcare and finance domains. Tom owns multiple patents in predictive and adaptive enterprise resource management. Tom currently leads the manufacturing vertical industry practice for Splunk, where he evangelizes using data to drive organizational outcomes and real-time insights across IT, OT, security, and development disciplines. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey, Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sam. Hey, great to talk to you again.
Hey, and I am super excited to have you just because the kind of work that you do, especially working with these IT teams, OT teams, it's going to be so fascinating for our listeners. Just to kick things off, Tom, do you want to start with your personal story and your current focus these days?
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. No, thanks for starting off there. My story really started, almost 3 decades ago as a young computer science and mathematics major. Working to get my undergraduate degree. I wanted to be a programmer. And then years into my degree, I had the fortune of meeting Steve Jobs at a conference where he was introducing the next computer system. Yeah, it was super exciting. And everything changed for me at that point when I saw some of his presentations and materials and stories around utilizing data to really tell a story and invoke capabilities of decision making that nobody else had done before. And I moved from pure computer science over to really doing computer science and graphic capabilities. So I wanted to be a computer graphic person, and I wanted to actually work for Pixar, which I attempted to get a job at for a number of years, but I wasn't that good of an artist. So I focused instead on really how to utilize data to give better insights into what's going on into the industry, and spent a little bit over 20 years in the IT software industry, specifically focused in around that, right? How do we imply context and capabilities around data to get insights into business operations, process, people, all the different technologies and capabilities to drive better outcomes which eventually led me into working with a lot of our OT brethren in the
Yeah.
IT manufacturing space. And I've been doing that ever since.
Okay, amazing. And if I look at your dashboards, to be honest, I mean, it's pretty close to Pixar. I mean, you really need to be artist in getting those. So yeah, so we are going to dig into all of that in your background, and we are going to dig into these stories as well. But before we do that, we have one of the standard questions for all of our guests, and that is going to be your perspective on business growth, Tom.
Yeah. No, interesting topic and one that I certainly ponder quite a bit, even after listening to some of your podcasts and what other guests are saying. But for me, growth is really it's more than just a process or an achievement for an organization. It's really a mindset and an objective.
Yeah.
And I look at it as a way to really kind of transform your organization forward, enable them to really reach beyond current technologies and tactics and things to allow them to paint a new canvas of capabilities or ideas. And, we often set audacious goals in business and really forget to kind of look back in the mirror at previous accomplishments that we have done. And those past goals also at some point seemed extremely audacious for us to achieve. But when you look at them in the rearview mirror, you're able to understand that it's just a mindset that allows you to reach beyond that. So
Yep.
for me, business growth is really understanding how to reach new levels of achievement. It's all about a growth mindset and how to really reach better outcomes and results in the end.
Yeah, and since you are talking about the mindset, to be honest, I mean, that is always going to be the biggest barrier when we talk about things like, Industry 4.0, or when we talk about IT and OT convergence. Because when we talk about the convergence, obviously, irrespective of whether we are talking to my IT community or my OT community, both of them are going to agree that, what, unless we come together on the same table, we will probably not be able to capitalize on the benefits that your technology such as your Industry 4.0 brings to the table, or Ash technology brings to the table, right? These are amazing technologies, but just because of the mindset, the politics, the barriers that we have created, and those are, man-made, as we know, and they are there for a reason, right? So obviously we need to break all of that, and everybody agrees to it. But in my experience, when I talk to many different guests, and we have done a lot of different episodes around Industry 4.0, when we look at this problem, there are many different challenges. Number one is going to be the real technical challenges related to how you design your network, right? So that is number one. And number two is going to be obviously political. So we are going to talk all of that. So in your experience, can you describe why IT and OT convergence matters? And if you want to talk about any specific stories where you were able to bring these together, and what were the specific benefits that you were able to realize, that'll be amazing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're spot on, right? It's, two different groups, ultimately in the end, really trying to achieve the same thing, which is business growth for the organization.
Yeah.
Right. By imparting their own capabilities, resources, and knowledge. We have a broad strategy and vision, or most organizations do, that they're trying to achieve. And it takes the combination of all the groups, whether it's IT, whether it's OT, to really pull those together in an operating model that provides additional value, synergies, where you can really multiply the capabilities of these organizations and the power that they bring to really achieve your end goals. And, I have several customers that have gone through this journey. One comes into mind that really struggled with how do you converge the IT group and the OT group to leverage the capabilities that exist in each of them. For the IT group, they brought significant resources to bear, right?
Okay.
So they had budget for networking infrastructure, segmenting off network to make sure that it's secure and robust and resilient. They brought a lot of, resourcing capabilities for cloud and hybrid approaches, so they could go ahead and offer multiple ways for data to be shared or leveraged across the organization, whether it was the OT group or not. And they brought, most importantly, the ability to consume and analyze the data by pulling it in either to a data warehouse or a common repository of some point, and really gave insights and the tools necessary to gain those insights where you normally wouldn't have those abilities if you weren't a big infrastructure organization like an IT department comes to bear. So, on the converse, you have the OT side, lots of knowledge and history behind the people that have worked the machines, the equipment, understand the process. One person that came to mind had 30 plus years, knew every single piece of equipment on the factory floor,
Yeah.
the PLCs, the HMIs, the RTUs. He did the ladder logic programming when he was a young youth, right? He has all the spreadsheets and recipes memorized by heart, and he could recite them off a whim and tell you exactly where, if something was breaking down, what was the problem, right?
Yeah.
The stamping machine is running too hot. The injection molding machine hasn't cooled off enough, and there's not enough delay between cycle A and cycle B. All these things just knew right off the top of his head.
Yeah.
So when IT came to him and said, hey, we want to help you out. We want to be part of the process to allow you to get the value that we bring with our tools and capabilities. He said, there's no reason. I don't need you. I don't see any value in what you're going to bring. You got to prove to me what's going to be helpful to me. And it really wasn't until this individual went on vacation and things started breaking down, because he had all this stuff in spreadsheets and paper documents and forms that were outside of a codified repository of knowledge.
Yeah.
That the organization really realized, well, geez, IT can come in and we can digitize all this stuff for you. Yeah. So if you're not here, hey, great. Okay, we'll put it in a common knowledge repository for you. You can use it when you're here. You can add to it. So you can add to that knowledge base. You can have people search it quickly in case you're busy doing something else, or you can, share it with the rest of the teams to figure out if there's something maybe you missed as you move forward, as one example. And that was the starting point, right? It still took a lot of convincing. This person, like I said, 30 years in the industry, doesn't need an IT. In fact, IT wasn't even in the organization. They had no IT department, right? It was John who did copiers and scanners and maybe a couple printers and stuff. And that was their IT department when they started out.
Yeah.
Since it has grown significantly. So this group eventually, they got together and they learned that, the people in the IT were really the technical layer that enabled for the storing and the processing of that data. So they provided all the data storage subsystems for them. They showed how they could back up all their recipes, how they could collate and coalesce all of the historian data and the PLC information, the firmware, everything that they had in their environment. And if they wanted to keep the network separate, they showed how they could do that in even better capacity than they currently had by leveraging some of the virtualized network capabilities that IT had access to, but the factory did not.
Yeah.
They showed them how IT brought to bear some of the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth types of capabilities to get better environmental sensors and analysis.
Yeah.
And it really was a process and a partnership of the data that they brought, as well as the process that the OT group was trying to maintain, and really making sure that the crucial capabilities that each group really held tight and needed to make sure they were successful were not violated, but were added to and strengthened over time. And that's really how the partnership kind of evolved and allowed them to get beyond, just this, hey, you have your silo, I have mine. Now it really needs to be really a convergence of the two technologies to make them run better together.
Yeah, so very interesting story. So we are actually going to go one level deeper into this and understand, what were the factors. Number one, why is there this divide? So I'm actually going to give you an example. Let's say if I'm the CEO right now or the CFO of the organization, for me, I don't care whether it is IT or OT. Tomorrow, if I'm going to have a cybersecurity attack, I am not going to be finger pointing between IT or OT. I am going to be thinking whether I can run my factory, whether I can run my plant, whether I can ship my orders or not. So tell us, why did this divide was there to begin with? What are the core reasons? Was this because, the talent base is completely separate? Because the IT never spoke to OT? Is it because the complete separation of the infrastructure? What were the core reasons for this divide?
Yeah, I think it started out as it was just two separate groups, right, that eventually grew apart. IT had their own methodologies and capabilities to do things. The OT group is like, look, it's a tight ship. It runs great. We don't want to introduce change or affect change into anything.
Yeah.
And adding new technology could be so disruptive that it brings everything down. So, One was risk, right? I mean, if you have a network go down in an IT organization, it usually doesn't cause a machine to blow up, right? Or
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
break down or have some sort of failure. Not the case in OT, as we all know. So it's definitely a reluctance there, right? They didn't understand on the OT side or see the benefit of having the business capability that's provided by IT add any additional value. And so it was, how do we get past that divide of one group having all this capability and breadth of scale, the IT department, and knowledge that they bring, really cross over that chasm for the OT group that doesn't want to see any change and doesn't want to see any disruption into the way they've done things for the last decade or two or three or four.
So let me ask you this question. I mean, see, IT guys were always hated inside the company, to be honest. I've been doing this for 20 years. Okay. If I talk to my sales does not like to talk to IT because IT is seen to be slowing things down. They are really sort of perceived as the impediment for growth, since we are talking about growth here. So if I have my sales department, sales is going to say, you know what, if I talk to IT, they are going to take forever. I'm not going to be able to close my deal. So why am I talking to IT? Do I have an app here that I can simply install without talking to IT? I'm going to bypass IT completely. Now, if I talk to my marketing is probably going to have similar feeling for IT. Finance is probably going to have similar feeling for IT, that I don't want to be talking to those guys. Those guys are very checklist, operated guys, and I am not going to get real business value when I actually talk to IT. But we have come a long way, to be honest, in realizing the value that IT really brings to the table. Okay, they have been able to work with sales, marketing, product development, engineering, every other department. So why is OT such a big deal to break through in their territory when we were able to break through in every other department? That IT is really important. You need to follow the checklist if you really want to sustain as the organization.
Yeah. I think it's a couple of different things, right? So this one customer I was talking about with the technician that had been there for 30 years, he didn't know a router from from a fax machine, right? As far as he was concerned, it's just some gizmo over in corporate side of the house. He was there. He liked turning dials, pressing knobs, buttons. That was his world, and he understood that. This is just another, what he thought of was, another corporate layer of stuff on top of what he already had to deal with. And it's difficult from a people person perspective to kind of move beyond that when you don't need or see the reason to adapt or adopt any of this new technology. So some of the old processes might need to be changed. Maybe you need to make adjustments, but you could do that on the factory line without having to go to IT like you were talking about, or if you were really progressive in the OT side, right? You could do your own shadow IT and bring your own components and capabilities. I think the difference is that IT as of late has really recognized that they can't just be an infrastructure layer that is a black box. They actually have to be a partner with the group that they're working with. So when you talk about marketing or sales, they're partnering with them to say, what's the business outcome? What's the value that you need to derive? And in the case of, for sales, as an example, I've seen IT departments go above and beyond with figuring out how to get, mobile campaigns and devices outside of their own environment to work with their systems, extend their technology stacks to allow integration with things that maybe are not as traditional, whether hybridized cloud environments or mobile platforms or other types of systems and procedures and processes that typically they wouldn't normally expose themselves to, just to make sure that the value that they're bringing, is actually something that they can utilize. On the OT side, I think the big difference now and the change is that IT is coming and saying, how can we automate some of this stuff to take the pressure away? How can you leverage our technology? Not necessarily be absorbed by it, but how can you leverage this technology and these processes that IT affords, whether it's through software automation systems or robotic process automation or hybridized cloud environments where you can start sharing data on the OT side out to partners and other factory or integrator sites and get real-time information and data sets back, to exposing your PLCs and HMIs right back to the factory or the manufacturer. IT can be a conduit to doing that, and they can show them how to do that a lot simpler and in a lot easier fashion because they've already set up that infrastructure that allows flexibility in those ways. And I think that's where things are starting to change, and OT understands we can leverage some of the business knowledge because that business knowledge is crucial to shifting with all of the changes that are going on today, whether it's your supply chain, whether it or lack of supply chain as it is today, or whether it is actually just optimizing the factory floor and really codifying, consuming, correlating, and federating the data off of all of our systems so that we can get better insights. IT typically already has data visualization or analytics capabilities, whether it's a data lake or some sort of deep data warehouse where you can pull this off and start correlating all this information in real time. It makes a huge difference being able to not only visualize that, but have somebody else that's an expert that knows how to do that without impacting what you're doing on a daily basis. It's truly a partnership as we're moving forward.
Okay, so I am actually going to bring one example here based on my conversations with different OT people, IT people, and I try to be as objective as possible. In my case, when I talk to OT folks, obviously they are super passionate about technology, super passionate about what IT people are trying to do, to be honest. Okay, if you talk to any of the CIOs right now or any of the IT folks, they very rarely talk about the programming aspect of the problem because they know that obviously the programming is important, but what is more important is how this particular product or feature is going to sustain inside the organization. It's going to have all of those bells and whistles that an IT software is going to bring. That is going to be the code needs to be secure, the code needs to be sustainable, it needs to be scalable, like whole list of checklists that you can go through.
Yeah.
Now, if I talk to my OT guys, and by the way, if I were the 1-year IT guy, I would probably be talking similar to what my OT guys are talking. They are talking, hey, you know what? I can program this particular component. It's really easy. These are REST API. I'm actually going to program it. And they have no idea where it is going to be deployed, what the product life cycle is going to be. Because in case of software development, you have to follow the software development life cycle to be able to create the kind of program that is going to really work for the enterprise. So now, let's say if I were to ask you the difference in the mindset, the way OT likes to look at the problem, and what are the things that they are missing in creating a truly enterprise software that a corporation need to avoid all of those financial risks that they are going to get, whether it is because of the maintenance of the code, whether it is going to be the cybersecurity side of the problems, or it is going to be just overall scalability of the solution. So an IT guy looks at this as if you are creating a digital product as opposed to creating just a bunch of lines of program that nobody can understand except you.
Yeah, I think for IT, it's you develop it, you put it out in the ether system, and you forget about it for the most part, right? But the one thing that IT has going for it in this context is while they're very quick to go ahead and make changes because they can, right? Because the system is designed for quick adoption and flexibility. That doesn't mean that you're going to do that on the OT side, right? So they sometimes forget that. And what I like to instruct, with this one customer I was talking about earlier, the IT guys finally got it after spending a day in the life with the OT guys, right? We talked with their CEO and we said, look, you guys want to implement this new capability and you want to basically make the OT environment similar to a software development environment, right? Where you're constantly changing recipes, building new things, and making sure that you're getting the best output in the end, right? And I said, and it's great, you can do that. But before you do, you have to have the IT guys sit with the OT guys to understand what the context of the problem is while you're making those changes and how it affects things. It's go back to the example I talked about earlier. If you shut down a network, right, in a corporate environment, you might not get email, but a system's not going to blow up, right? You're not going to have potential human hazard or real types of serious consequences typically that you would on the OT side. So we took the IT group. I took one developer and one manager, right? Manager managed the actual process of deployment for the organization. So he was a development deployer. And then we actually had the software developer with her. So he was an SRE engineer. And we said, I want you two to sit with the OT process engineer and watch what he does on a daily basis to go through so you can understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Long story short, we got through a week of doing that, not full time, but about a week of doing that. We took them back and we said, great, what did you learn about it? And it was interesting. There's two different things that really stuck in my mind. The first one was the IT guy said, holy heck, we can't just arbitrarily go and make these changes without better testing and insights into what's going to happen. That was the first thing. The second insight was, wow, we can really help streamline some of the stuff that they do if we keep in mind that first rule, and we can really help them. And conversely, on the OT side, the guy said, wow, I could really have these guys help me automate some of the daily maintenance tasks that I typically do, pulling off historian data, doing some analysis on it, things that take time, but aren't really accretive to the overall process and output of the systems. So, being able to kind of put yourself in a day in the life of what's going on makes a big impact for these groups, and is something I recommend anybody do if they really have this, sort of difference of opinion between the two groups on how things should be done. So it's challenging, though. It really is challenging.
Okay, so that's the mindset of the house, right? So now let's talk about the technical details a little bit in terms of the architecture. So as we know, if we want the benefits of Industry 4.0, there's a real wall between your IT and OT. I mean, the network wall that has always been there. I don't know how long that is going to be there, if there is going to be any sort of solution that can break the wall and the communication can open up. So from the technical perspective, let's say if I ask you, what is the ideal architecture in terms of breaking that wall so that, IT and OT can communicate freely? Is it going to be is still some sort of, gateway technology, or can we combine these network, converge these networks? Do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, I think there is going to be a further convergence of the network, right? There's no reason why the OT group should not take advantage of the capabilities that IT networks bring.
Okay.
However, as you converge, there still has to be some separation between the two groups. So whether that is doing, virtual network segmentation, whether it's doing true firewalls, whether it is, doing data diodes in extreme cases where you need to make sure really it's only one-way traffic, guaranteed one-way traffic. But the core infrastructure that IT provides, the routers, the firewalls, the switches, all of that stuff absolutely is starting to, and I'm seeing it with that customer I spoke about. They're already starting to adopt some of the things that IT has already vetted out. So as an example, they had a very critical process in one of their network segments on the OT side. They said, hey, it's time for refresh. We understand we're having things break down because of network problems, et cetera. They leveraged IT because IT came to them and said, well, geez, we've already validated this. If you need absolute network guaranteed time slices, if you need reliable redundant systems, these switches we know work, and we've tested them, we validated them. Let's go ahead and leverage these for you. Let's do some tests. Let's check it out. But let's keep it separate from the IT traffic for now. Let's either physically separate it or virtually separate it so that you're comfortable with it. It's a great way. And it's something that I see more and more happening in the organization, especially as we start to hybridize some of this stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to see more organizations do both local networking capability along with hybridized cloud capability. And I think that's the natural progression that you're going to see, because information can't stay compartmentalized forever unless there is security reasons or really some fundamental core reason why you can't share it. Because when you start sharing the information and you make it more freely available, you get better synergies and returns on what you're trying to accomplish. So that organization I talked about, they ended up sending some of their information. They have a virtual private network segment that they've done.
Yeah.
They have redundant routers and switches throughout, all enterprise class grade. They don't have any Wi-Fi on the factory floor, though. They're using some low power Bluetooth, but IT helps them maintain all that and make sure that they're up and running. They're monitoring some of the signals and some of the edge information off of a separate network to at least give them visibility without impacting the actual OT or ICS network.
Okay, very interesting. So we are going to dig a little deeper into the architecture as we are talking about the IT and OT convergence. So as we know, let's say if we are talking about decent size, IT organization,
when you are going to have multiple systems in the IT organization, there's typically going to be some sort of either the ESP layer or the integration layer that typically connects all of these systems. For example, let's say if you talk about the ERP, and then obviously, let's say if you have some sort of e-commerce front, then you are probably going to have your website or getting orders from your e-commerce portal. If you have decentralized warehouse, then probably you are going to have a WMS system, TMS system. Now we are talking about the OD side of the system. And typically these were not really integrated with the main core IT network. These were either isolated or independent from the IT network. Now, when we talk about different data types, okay, the data types that we are going to have in the IT network are going to be slightly different. These are business data sets, right? So you have the sales orders, you have your purchase orders, you have your GL entries, you have your probably the customer interaction data. But when we talk about, let's say, the OT side of data, the data type that you have is very different. We are talking about things like, histogram, where they are literally pinging the server every single second. So obviously the amount of data that you are going to get from the OT side is going to be very different. Now, if we are either trying to create some sort of either data lake or the integration layer, do you believe that only one tool can be used for the end-to-end integration between IT, and can one data lake accommodate the needs of the IT as well as OT, or there are going to be different tool sets?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Right. So whether you're on the OT side and you're grabbing, SCADA, RTU, tag sensor information, right? Totally different methodology and data mechanism than the ERP, EAM, CRM, PLM, GIS stuff on the IT side of the house. I think there's going to be a combination of solutions, right? There's not going to be one data chain governance, if it can call it that, system or body of knowledge. And I think for the reason of just the technical debt that we've had over the years, right? There's not one system that's going to provide that yet. Are we working towards that? I think we are. But between the metadata from IT and the data layers from OT, there absolutely is going to start to be a convergence, a hybridized convergence, where you're taking those data layers and you're really having more of a trusted data layer that exists between those systems that you can leverage. And then that system can be propagated up. If you're thinking about like ISA 95 layer, right? Going from 1 to 3, you have your separation and stuff. I think when you start to get to 4, where you want to do things like analytics, visualizations, notifications and stuff, you need to be able to pull the context and the information from layers 3 down to 1 in order to really get some actionable insight. And whether that is a data lake or a hybrid cloud infrastructure, I think all those solutions are going to come into play at one point. If you can eventually get to a single repository, all the better, because then you can really take advantage of the synergies of using that one layer to really aggregate and analyze that information, regardless of the mix. But does that exist today? I don't think it does. I think we're on our way to it, but I think there's still some time to get there.
So I'm actually going to give you a very interesting problem. Okay, so today you are going to be the architect of my infrastructure, and I am the mid-market executive, manufacturing executive. I know that the convergence problem exists, and my IT and OT guys are not going to listen to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send them $1 million so that they don't open their mouth. Okay, and I'm going to give you all the authority, Tom, that you can design your ideal architecture. So if you were to design the ideal architecture that is really going to help with the Industry 4.0 initiatives, where I can, let's say, utilize robots, I can have the IT and OT convergence. So describe to me the entire architecture in terms of how the ideal architecture is going to look like. Which are the component and the systems that are going to be important for me to be able to run my business? Let's say there are no budget constraints, no political constraints. You have complete freedom in designing the ideal architecture. So how would the ideal architecture look like?
Yeah, for me, I think there's a couple of different ones that work very well. But looking at some of what I'm going to take examples from what I've seen customers do, and I think the better ones out there today are the ones where you're taking all of the structured and unstructured data from the IT systems, so the SAPs, the ERPs, et cetera. Take the raw time series data from historians, SCADAs, IoT devices, throwing those up into, still having them separated either via firewall and or some sort of virtualized networking environment, but have them in the same environment so we can share the data across the infrastructure components.
Yeah.
The IT systems, the structured and unstructured, typically feed into a data lake.
Okay.
And then the OT side of the house, the contextual input of that goes to the data lake, and the time series output propagated up to an analytics engine at the top. So what I would do is one repository to store everything structured and unstructured, as well as the time series information.
Yeah.
And then the analytics layer on top of that to understand and correlate and really kind of give the insights into what's going on across those lower level layers so that you could really get some deep analytics as to, okay, here's my orders coming in from my ERP and my SAP and my whatever system. And this is what's going on the OT side of the house to actually produce that. Maybe here's what's going on in social media or trends or customer sentiment from a buying perspective, and being able to understand and basically sway my business and my direction based on what I'm seeing from all four of those things combined, not just one independent. So that way I can say, hey, maybe I need to add another line because everybody's buying aluminum this week, right? Aluminum foil is going through the roof. I don't know why, but they are. And maybe I can find out that there's a social media challenge on TikTok with aluminum foil hats. Who knows? Yeah. But those are opportunities to really capture all of that information into one area constantly, and then have the ability at any time to ask what's going on with both the market as well as the business, as well as the production, and then go ahead and guide the organization to support that based on those data insights. So that's kind of how I would do it at a very high level. I mean, there's some low-level technical things. I mean, I would definitely have that trusted data layer that I talked about earlier. I would make sure that the infrastructure, had all of the security postures in place to make sure that I was secure, et cetera. And I would also try to expose as much of the data model that I have from an API perspective, right? So being able to have deep insights and reach into things without directly connecting to them, but through an API or some sort of methodology, absolutely helps as you go down further the road of doing insights and analysis on what's going on for your own business.
Okay, awesome. So that's it for today. Do you have any last minute closing thoughts or remarks for our listeners?
Yeah, I think, the one thing that I've learned in all the examples of working with customers on IT and OT is that it's not just about the machine or the technology. It's about the man and the machine, or the woman and the machine, right? How do you combine the capabilities of both of those? And at the end of the day, it's not about who owns which technology. It's about how you can leverage the data and the expertise from both of these organizations to really drive better outcomes and better value. And if you can give data-driven insights to do that, the implications and actions of your business' ability to grow is only prosperous as you move forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be there's definitely going to be value, and you are going to see a lot more that there are going to be roles that are going to drive the convergence in the market, because you are going to need that a lot more. The way your networks are going to be designed, the way your machines are going to be designed, the way your systems are going to be designed. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more convergence that we are going to see in the market if we really want to capitalize on the Industry 4.0 initiatives. On that note, Tom, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful episode.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Tom, head over to splunk.com. It's SPLUNK.com, and learn how to deliver real-time insights throughout the manufacturing process. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. If anything in this podcast resonated with you and your business, you might want to check other related episodes, including the interview with Dave Westrom, who describes the importance of understanding the true internal capacity for manufacturers and how that could assist with decision making in your plans. Also, the interview with Michael Pytel, who shares how he can create a far more precise digital twin of the warehouse by mapping warehouse workers in the system. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.